This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
Imagine feeling anxious, exhausted, or foggy-headed for years and then discovering the culprit was hiding right inside your walls. In today's episode, I'm joined by a mold specialist to bust the myth that mold is only a problem in old, damp homes. Get ready to rethink what's really making you sick. Hi, friends. It's Natalie here, and today's episode is a really important one, truly one of those conversations I wish everyone could hear. We're going to talk about something many people experience, but hardly many talk about because they don't know about it, toxic mold and its huge impact on your health. I'm joined by Danielle Wollmann, who shares her own personal journey, years of mysterious health struggles, and feeling completely gaslit by doctors and healthcare professionals. She finally discovered that hidden mold in her home was the culprit. Danielle opens up about what those symptoms actually look like and hint, not just the obvious ones, the incredible detective work it takes to uncover mold and why even people in places you wouldn't expect, like dry states, can be affected by mold. Whether you're a parent, someone struggling with weird fatigue or anxiety, or you just want to make sure that your family is safe, you're going to get so much value from today's episode. We're going to talk about tests that actually work and what to do if you suspect mold at work, school, or in a rental. Make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss more real-life, solution-focused conversations like this one. And if you want more wellness tips, behind-the-scenes updates, and resources mentioned in this episode, sign up for my weekly newsletter at natalietysdal.com. Let's get right into it. You don't want to miss this one. Danielle, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and really excited to share about this topic today.
So the topic is one that is not talked about enough. I know you're going to feel the same way. I know you do. And this has personally affected my family in a lot of ways too. I live in a state that's not as wet, but we do still have mold issues, even in the state of Colorado. But some of my family out in Florida and other places, this is a really big issue for people. Give us a little background on how this became so important to you.
Well, it hits very close to home for me. This is a very personal issue because it really affected my health in many different ways for a very long time. And for me, longer than most people have to go before they discover toxic mold was the root to a lot of their health issues. And for me, it was 16 years living in the house, probably longer because we had moved from an old house that had mold. But in our one house that made us very sick, it was 16 years that we lived there, where I suspected mold and I was looking for help. I was looking for answers and nobody was able to help me. Nobody gave me answers. And in fact, it was quite the opposite, that I felt gaslit by so many people. I felt gaslit by doctors, by naturopathic doctors, by home inspectors, by remediation companies. And eventually we just took matters into our own hands and we discovered our basement was riddled with hidden toxic mold. Everything looked fine from the inside, from the outside, and it was hidden. And those toxins just caused so many issues for my own health, but also my husband and my 3 kids. And so now I'm just really passionate about sharing all this information with others so other people don't have to spend 10, 15, 20 years searching for answers or feeling gaslit and not getting the help they need.
What were the symptoms? What led you to go down this path? And what are the typical symptoms of someone who has mold toxins in their body?
That's a great question. My symptoms are symptoms that I see in a lot of the women I work with. One of the first few symptoms that showed up for me was extreme anxiety, to the point where I was feeling debilitated to leave the house even. Everyday actions would just completely drive me to a state of fear of what could go wrong. I wasn't sleeping at night. I developed insomnia. I started to get some skin issues. I went on to develop chronic fatigue syndrome, extreme brain fog, where I had a hard time even getting my words out. I had a hard time communicating. I would go grocery shopping and I couldn't remember my PIN number to pay for groceries. I would try to talk to people and I just wasn't even able to have simple conversations. I went on also to develop an autoimmune disease as a result of the toxic mold exposure, which is another very common symptom we see. Mold is a trigger for a lot of autoimmune diseases. And we're seeing Hashimoto's in particular come up with a lot of women. And that's what I was diagnosed as Hashimoto's, as well as my son. So those are the common ones I see: the anxiety, the fatigue, skin issues, sleep issues, also a lot of hormone issues. Hormone imbalances will happen when exposed to mold as well.
Wow, that's a lot. And those are things that so many people go through anyway for lots of different health reasons or family history. That how did you find that it was mold?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I started having all of these health symptoms before I became a registered holistic nutritionist. And it was actually the reason I went to school to learn more, because I knew there was more going on. Doctors weren't able to help me or give me answers. I was feeling gaslit, like I said. So I went and I got the education and I started studying and I started applying different things to help myself understand what was going on. Now, what I know now is that education on mold illness, mold toxicity is lacking. So a lot of us who are natural practitioners, holistic practitioners, naturopathic doctors, we don't get the training we need in school. And most of the time we have to go back and get those courses, get that education, because we experience it ourselves and because we're sick ourselves. So for me, it really was digging of, what is happening, what is going on. And it's just researching, all the different root cause. Was it heavy metals? Was it parasites? Mold toxicity. And then we found the hidden mold in our house and all the pieces fit together. And we were able to take the steps to, get out of that house and to recover. And I'm now at a point where, in my mid 40s, I feel better now than I have pretty much my entire life.
Wow.
So it is something that, the education isn't there for a lot of practitioners, but I encourage people to follow their gut. A lot of the times I talk to my clients and they say it's a gut feeling they have, that there's something else, there's something more. And that's what it was for me as well. So I would encourage people to just follow that gut feeling you have and keep digging and keep looking for answers.
So how did you ultimately, how do you, now that do you work with men, women, families? They come to you because they suspect mold, but they're not sure, or they're trying to detox? How do you help people?
Yeah, really good question. So most of the clients that I work with who come to me, they know that there's mold exposure already. They have kind of been through that education. They followed their gut feeling. They discovered mold. And now they're looking for a mold literate practitioner. And that's when they find me. I also coach people. I do have a course, Mold 101 course, that really teaches people all the steps to take if you suspect mold and you don't know yet. Because that's a long road too. That is something that I find people get stuck on because of the lack of education. There are not good mold inspectors out there. There are not a lot of people who really understand the dangers of mold and how to find hidden mold. So I really educate people on that side as well. And then once they're ready to start the detox process, then I guide them through that. And I work with clients on a long-term basis. So usually 6 months to a year to 18 months to get them through the mold detox process.
Okay, I have so many questions that are going through my mind right now. The first is, are there areas, when you live in a really humid area, obviously it's much more prevalent in states that are coastal, or correct?
Yes and no. So when you live in states that have very high humidity, you can have issues definitely in your house if that humidity level is high all the time. But what I tell everyone is, if you live in a house that has indoor plumbing, you are at risk for mold. So mold really does not discriminate. It can be found in dry states, in humid states, and new houses, in old houses. It can be found everywhere. That being said, there are places, that have been hurricane prone, that, big storms have come through, big flooding events. Those houses really, you have to watch, because, is remediation done properly? How long were they sitting wet for? After the water came through. But really, I do get asked, what states are safer? And I said, well, there really isn't a safe place. You just have to buy a house that hasn't had any major water events or, plumbing issues.
Yes. And following up on that, I have a daughter in Nashville and a daughter in Florida, and they both have dehumidifiers. Here in Colorado, we put water in our homes because it's so dry. But does something like that help?
Absolutely. So I get asked all the time, Danielle, what did you do when you bought a new house to prevent mold? And that's exactly one thing that we did, is we put dehumidifiers in our house. We live in a fairly dry climate, but what a lot of people don't know is, a brand new house, people think that they're safe because they're brand new. When in reality, sometimes we're seeing some of these new houses are the worst. But for example, a new house is going to have a lot of materials that have been wet in the building process, and you need to dry that out. And if you don't put a dehumidifier in your house to pull out that moisture, those humidity levels will rise. So I always say have, a little meter. You can get them on Amazon, $10, put them in your house and watch that humidity level. You do not want it to rise over 40, 45, 50% maximum, but ideally under
So
45.
what is the ideal? 35% is
30
healthy?
35 is getting kind of dry. You might be uncomfortable. You might run into other issues. I like to keep mine at 40. 40% is a happy medium. It's comfortable. It's dry enough. You're not going to run into moisture issues.
So how would you know? I mean, I think that's one of the big questions for people is, do you call a mold inspector? Is there a home kit? I mean, obviously there are some telltale signs in a bathroom when you see mold spores, but a lot of times it's hidden, right?
100% it's hidden. So this is a great question. This is like the $1 million question. How do you find a hidden mold? How do you know you have hidden mold? As I was saying, it doesn't discriminate, so you don't always see it. So what I always recommend people start with is called an ERMI test. So this is a dust test that you can order, and Biobiomics is the company that creates them. And clinically, it's what I've seen be the most accurate to help people find the mold in their house that's making them sick. So what you would do is you will go online with this dust test. It comes in and you are going to go through your house and collect all the dust that you can find. And once you've collected all the dust, you're going to send it into the lab and they're going to send you back a report. And that report is going to really break down which molds are in your house. And it's going to give you a score. There is a Hertzme 2 score that you'll find on there. And those are the 5 most toxigenic molds, the ones that are going to make people really sick. And they're going to give you a score. What is your home testing? And, we like to see a very low score on that. There are certain molds that I'll say are zero tolerance if you're quite sick from mold. So that would be Stachybotrys, Chaetomium, Fusarium. We don't want to see any of those.
I didn't know there were so many different types of mold.
So many. And this is where people get confused because, some people think, oh, there's mold in my house, it's going to make me sick. Or some people might say, oh, only toxic black mold is the one that's going to make me sick. But in reality, it's somewhere in the middle. There are many different kinds of toxic molds, but not all molds are necessarily going to be extremely toxic and make you really sick. We do expect to see some molds in every home as part of the normal biome. Every ERMI test is going to come back with some molds, but we want to look and see what are the normal common molds we expect to see and what are those toxigenic molds that could be making you sick. So that ERMI test is always what I like to start with. And clinically, what I see is that ERMI test tends to line up with the urine mycotoxin test we do. And then we know, okay, this is where these molds are coming from. And then from there, we can create a plan to, one, address the home, because that's very important. And then also address the body as well based on those mycotoxins.
So you do this initial test that you recommend. You find that there is something. What is the next step? Is it an expert or is that something you take care of yourself? Are there people who come in and clear this out or is it a whole lot deeper than that?
Yes, that is a really good question. And this is where it gets frustrating for a lot of people. So the next step, you do your ERMI test, it comes back. Let's say, for example, we see some Chaetomium, some Stachybotrys. You're very sick. You need to find that hidden mold. You'll want to hire a mold inspector or an indoor environmental professional is what we call them, an IEP. Now, these are very hard to find. To find good ones who truly understand and take the time to find hidden mold. Many inspectors will come in and do what's called an air test. An average person wanting to do mold inspection, they may, Google mold inspector their area, find someone, not do a lot of research, and this inspector will come in and just set up an air trap test in the middle of their house and just do one. And that test can come back saying, everything's fine. It looks good. You're good to go. And now this person has this false sense of security that their house is safe when it's not. And that person has not used any tools. They have not looked to see where hidden mold is. And this is where we run into a lot of issues. And this was my issue because we did that and we were told we were fine. Meanwhile, we found lots of toxic hidden mold. So I always coach my clients, and I have this in my course as well. How do you find a good inspector? Take the time. Don't hire someone who is the cheapest. Don't hire the only person in your area. I have clients who hire inspectors from across the country sometimes to come in. and do their inspections.
Wow. So it's the
I'm
different
here in Canada.
types of test. It can't just be a middle of the room air test. My daughter was, at one point, we suspected mold in an apartment that she was in. There was some water damage and they said they had redone things. They had just painted right over the wall. And we were like, there wasn't enough work done here. Things like that. I'm sure you have lots of examples like that. Like you can paint over black dots on a wall. You can even put drywall over mold inside of a wall. Is that where you're seeing hidden mold?
Yes, it happens all the time. And this is where people don't understand what is proper mold remediation.
Mm.
So, if we're going, the order of operations, we do that ERMI test, there's mold. We bring in a really good inspector who has spent maybe 5-6 hours, use all his tools, really found where this mold is. Now we have to do proper remediation. And like you said, it is not painting over the mold. It is not spraying. There are companies who will come and they'll say, we'll just fog your house. You'll be good to go. It'll kill the mold. It will not. Mold always needs to be removed. So if mold is drying on the drywall, you need to cut out the drywall and move
So
it.
you can't clean it off. If you see mold, say, for instance, in a shower, obviously that's a wet area. If you notice black spots or green spot, or I don't even know what all it would look like, is there a substance you can scrub the tile or the wall with? Or does it have to be taken out?
So if mold is growing on a non-porous surface, like porcelain, for instance, in the bathroom, that can be cleaned off. You don't even need any harsh chemicals. You could clean that off with a microfiber cloth. You could use, dish soap because it's not in there. It's not growing into anything. It's on a non-porous surface. You can just clean that off. There's lots of different, non-toxic products you can get to. But the second mold starts growing in something, those roots have set up camp. You cannot kill it. People always say, get some mold killer. You cannot kill mold because those roots will always be there. And they can continue to produce mycotoxins. And the second that they have a high humidity setting or a little bit of water, it's going to come back to life again. So you always need to be removing it. So if, there is some mold in your bathroom, if it's just growing on the bathtub, which is rare, usually it doesn't happen. Yes, you could wipe it off. But if it's in the caulking, you have to remove that caulking. If it's growing up in the drywall, that drywall needs to be removed. But then you have to look deeper. Why was that mold growing? What is the source of that moisture? That is ultimately what needs to be repaired. So is there a leak happening somewhere behind the bathtub that needs to get fixed? Is there an exhaust fan in your bathroom? Are you using it to help bring that humidity down and get that humidity out?
Yeah.
So there are lots of things to look at, but that is a big misconception people have, is that they can just kill the mold and spray it and they're okay. Or vinegar on it or bleach on it. And I'll always say bleach is the biggest no-no when it comes to mold. Don't ever spray bleach on it. It will many times make the situation worse. It'll make it.
Wow, we think bleach kills everything. No.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, bleach is actually made mostly of water. And so I always say, what do you need for mold to grow? You need two things. You need food, a food source for it, and you need water. Well, with bleach, you're spraying it with water. It might bleach the color, sure, but you're not removing that mold. And then further, what happens is because mold feels threatened by that bleach, it senses there's a threat. It feels like it's in danger. So it throws off more mycotoxins.
Oh, wow.
And those mycotoxins, that is ultimately what is making us sick. So it's not the mold itself. Mold, it's almost like mold is the fire. And mycotoxins are the smoke that it produces. And it's that smoke that gets all over our house, all into everything. And we're breathing that in. And that is what's causing damage within the body. And that's what's making us sick.
So before we get to what to do if you think you've been exposed physically with your body, what if you think it's happening not in your home, say in your workplace? Or we suspect at one point where my daughter goes to school, there was a room we suspected because several people had gotten sick. But when you suspect it, but it's not even your home, what rights do you have as a? Imagine in different places, it's different things. What do you do?
Very good question. And this is something I run into a lot. I'll have clients where they've moved out of a moldy home and into a clean one. And they've done everything they need to do with all their belongings and cleaned everything. And then they say, but there's mold at work. And they're almost stuck as far as getting better because they're just exposed all day. We spend 8 hours a day either at work or school. So this is a really tough one because, again, there's just not a lot of education. So when it comes to taking, let's say, even legal action, there is some movement happening in this world where we're starting to see people having to take accountability for mold, but it is slow and it takes a lot of effort. Now, I have had clients who have gone to their workplace and done an ERMI test in their workplace, brought it to their boss. The boss and the company were very willing to take the necessary steps, and they were very willing to get the inspector in to do the remediation. They were very willing to. So that's something I always recommend, at least bring up the conversation. Do an ERMI in your workplace or school. Bring it up to whoever's in charge and see if they're willing even to take action on it.
What if it's a rental property? What rights do you have in an apartment or a rental property?
Yeah, that's a tough one. So here in Canada, where I live, there are some pretty strict rules that landlords do have to provide clean air. That's, very standard. Now, as to the steps taken to provide that, is there strict rules that's taken? Not always. And each state is going to have different rules. So some states have very strict rules about what mold remediation looks like, about who can do it, about it following the IICRC S520 standards, but not all of them do. So it is going to vary state to state. So I always say, if you are a renter, look into whatever your rental board is in your area. Bring it up to them, see what kind of rights you have as a renter and push for that, because the more people speak up and the more they take action and the more education there is, the more we're going to start to see these things start to get better. But right now it can be a very difficult situation for renters with mold.
So let's talk about once you realize you've got a problem. And this is where you work with people in getting healthy as a nutritionist and then as a mold expert. How do you get that out of your body and start feeling well again?
Good question. So this is something that is not always an easy road. Mold affects every single system in the body. It is something that is fat soluble, so our body can store it away. And so it gets really hard to detox something that the body kind of stored to protect us. It gets stuck in bile because bile is what is used to process fats. And so the bile can recirculate and keep us sick. So I'll get into in a little bit all the different steps that are necessary. But the number one step that we need to get better is clean air. And I'll always say environment is the key. Now, what we see sometimes is there's two groups of people. The first group can leave a moldy environment and have clean air, and they feel better and they recover. And sometimes that's all they need. Sometimes they only need to get into clean air and they feel better. So I always say, let's start there. Put all of your resources into getting clean air first, and then we can work on the body. Or, we can support the body, but you have to have that priority of getting clean air. Then there's another group of people who have to go through a mold protocol for several reasons. One, maybe due to genetic reasons, their body just has a hard time detoxifying mold and they need help. And number two is something happens that is called colonization. So colonization is when you have been living in mold, oftentimes for more than 3 months, and those mold spores that you have been breathing every day actually set up camp inside your sinuses. So the sinuses are a moist, warm place, and mold loves that. So we can often get a colonization up in the sinuses. And so even if you get into clean air, like we say, is you become the moldy building. So you've left, you are now in clean air, but your body is still producing mycotoxins. So part of the protocol that we have to do is we have to make sure that we are getting that sinus colonization under control. So that way your body can actually fully heal. So when it comes to detoxing from mold, there are many different steps. And I always say, if you are someone who is sick from mold, you need to have patience in the process. And it takes at least 6 months, up to 2 years.
Wow.
It takes time. And it's very much depending on the person. A lot of people become very sensitive living in mold. It creates allergies, creates sometimes mast cell activation syndrome. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that or been hearing much about that. It's becoming much more common. And it creates people who are very sensitive. So as we're doing the detox process, we have to really go in stages. It's almost like an onion. We have to carefully take off one layer at a time before we get to the middle. So we say we have to start first with supporting the body. We have to prepare. We have to make sure the body has some nutrients, has some polyphenols that we get. If there's mast cell activation, we have to stabilize that first. And then we can get into supporting drainage. So drainage is how the body gets rid of toxins. So that is, making sure the colon is moving properly, making sure the liver and kidneys are supported, making sure the lymphatic system is moving, making sure we're sweating, all that drainage. And once we can open that up, now we can go in and we can really start mobilizing those toxins and getting them out of the body. Then we need to make sure that we're working on bile movement. So we get those fat soluble mycotoxins out of the bile. And then we have to go in and take care of that fungal overgrowth that often happens with mold. So we go in and do that. And then we can do a gut healing and repair protocol to heal and seal and get that barrier integrity back that we need for the gut lining. So it is a process and it takes time. So I tell people to be patient and trust the process. But with clean air, it definitely works. And I'm living proof. Like I said, I feel better now in my mid 40s than I ever have.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you, is the hope that you give people in all of those things that you said you struggled with. You've recovered from them?
Yes, absolutely. The one thing I do have to watch is because mold did trigger an autoimmune disease in me. Autoimmunity is something that you can put into remission, but you can't get rid of. So it's there. So once you have an autoimmune disease, you have to be careful of those triggers. And different environmental exposures can be triggers, stress can be triggers. So I still need to be very careful about my lifestyle and keep it, as stress-free as possible, really watch my nervous system, keep my diet clean, of course. But other than that, I do not have the symptoms of my autoimmune disease. All my thyroid numbers are in range. I do not have to be on thyroid medication.
Wow.
I think very clearly. My sleep is great. I am not debilitated by anxiety anymore. I don't have eczema all over my body. I struggled with a lot of food intolerances, bloating, SIBO. I don't have those anymore. My digestion is great. So I've been able to really overcome almost all of my symptoms.
You just think of all the people, is there a number of all the people who are undiagnosed, just thinking they're just sick?
Yeah. And I think it's a huge number. I think we're seeing a lot of people start to realize it. But if we look at the number, those of us who are in the mold world, we say, and this is a conservative number, we believe that up to 50% of homes have mold in them.
Wow.
So if you're looking at
I think businesses and schools are
buildings, yes, buildings.
Yeah.
Yes, buildings have mold. So when we start looking at that number and we start looking at the amount of people with autoimmune diseases and with recurring gut issues and SIBO that they can't get under control and hormone issues, then you start to look and what are those root causes that are triggering all those things? And could it be the environment?
Wow. Well, thank you so much for the information. I'll be sure to put some links in the show notes, including that first test that you mentioned for testing dust in your house.
Yeah, the ERMI dust test. Yes.
I'll be sure to put that in the show notes so that if anybody suspects it, that's the place to start. Danielle, thank you. We appreciate you.
Yes, thank you for having me on. And I'm so happy to share this valuable information with so many.
Thank you for joining the Natalie Tysdal Podcast. You can follow along on Instagram and at natalietysdal.com. Subscribe to the show to catch every new episode and leave a review so I can continue to bring you fresh content. See you next week.